everyone. Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. We are reading through the transcript because we don't have video. This is California versus Erik and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides, the second time on trial for the homicides of Kitty and Jose. First trial ended in a mistrial. We are reading through the transcript. We are on the state's case, part 30. We are very, very, very close to the end. We just have a few more witnesses to get through. We are currently continuing on with the pathologist's testimony. We're on cross with Erik's attorney, Leslie Abramson, doing the cross examination. So, without further ado, I'm going to shrink myself. Please hit the like button as I do, and let's get started. And we're going to pick up right where we left off. So we had a recess. The lunch recess was taken, and now court is back in session. The court says everybody is here and we'll have the jury out. The jury entered the courtroom and the following proceedings were held. The court says the jury is in the jury box. You may continue your cross-examination. Ms. Abramson says, "Thank you, Your Honor." All right. Dr. Robert Lawrence is who is on the stand. So Ms. Abramson says, "I want to just clear up a few things with you, Dr. Lawrence. You had asked, here we go. You had mentioned during your direct examination that you marked something incorrectly on Ms. Menendez, what's called the internal injuries chart. You had marked one of the bone fractures in the wrong place." "Yes, the fracture of the right arm should be higher." "Let me give you the x-rays." "Is that the right arm?" "Correct." "Is this the right arm?" "I want you to use that. Here's the red thing so you can correct it." The witness complies. "Okay, and you've written a new X farther up on the radius bone." Humerus. That's the humerus, rather. "And farther up on the humerus, you've written the word correct, so we can ignore the X that's right below that, correct?" "Yes." "And there's another break in the forearm bone. Is that the ulna?" "Yes." "There are two bones in the forearm, correct?" "Yes." "One is the ulna, and what's the other one?" "Radius." "So the ulna is the one on the outside, more on the outside. The radius is on the thumb. On the inside, the thumb side, and the ulna is on the outside." "It depends on how old your arm, on how you hold your arm." It's not how old your arm is. That's not accurate. "It depends on how you hold your arm. In the atomic position, the ulna is on the inside of the body, standing with its palms facing forward." I wanted to ask you about that. I'll make a note. I want to finish some housekeeping for a moment. I put back up the x-ray of the foremost facial x-ray on Mrs. Menendez. This is number 174. Am I reading that x-ray correctly if I state that there are pellets on both the right side, big pellets, buckshot pellets on both the right side of the nose and the left side of the nose? Yes, probably. But the x-ray is rotated a little bit and it may be misleading. It's not a straight front on view. Doesn't that matter? It's rotated a little bit where the head is sort of turned to the right, slightly to the right. So turn to the right, but we're seeing, well, from the photographs, there are actual buckshot pellet wounds, but both sort of dead center on the forehead and on the left side of the nose, correct? Yes, as I recall. And on the tip of the nose itself? Yes. And this little diagram here that you were shown shows that. Although you've described it as a right orbit wound to the right eye, which is shown here on the diagram. There's also buckshot pellets on the nose, buckshot pellet on the left side of the nose, and that one pellet right in the middle of the forehead, correct? Yes. And those are all part of shot number 2? Yes. On her, correct? You call it number 2, and Dr. Golden calls it number 2. Yes. All right. Now you looked over the lunch hour at some of the ballistic evidence, and you selected an envelope that you believe contains a representative sample of the pellets. Yes. And the reason you selected this envelope was what? The pellet shows no significant deformity. And is it your understanding that this is, well, I told you during the break, this is a pellet from the scene, not from one of the bodies, correct? Yes. And you wanted to use that to measure the size, correct? Let me do the first cut because I promised the clerk I'd do it a certain way. You want to open it so you can get it out and measure it, correct? Yes. Let the record show I'm cutting the outside plastic envelope that holds. Inside, there's a yellow manila envelope with an evidence tag on it. Yes. And there's also a small plastic envelope with what appears to be buckshot pellet in it. Yes. And why don't you open that one and do your measurement? Try not to cut the writing. The witness complies. The court says, again, this is which exhibit? Ms. Abramson says, oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. The witness says, item number 24. Ms. Abramson says, that will only confuse things. Believe me, this is exhibit, in this trial, it's 48A. The witness says, that would be consistent with a number 4 buckshot. Ms. Abramson says, you used a little calibrator to measure that. This a micrometer. A micrometer. What was that? What was the measurement? It varied. It is quite misshapen, unlike I thought when I first looked at it. When I got it out of the bag, I see one side is flattened. It ranges from a diameter of 0.22 inches to 0.28 inches. Average is around 0.24 inches, which would be the size of a number 4 buckshot. How does he know this? He's a forensic pathologist, not a ballistics expert. But we're going to take that as expert opinion. Okay. And Ms. Abramson says, okay, that's because I looked it up. I'm not that much of a firearms expert, he says. I couldn't tell you the diameter of number 4 buckshot without looking it up, which I did. Awesome. So that clarifies that. Ms. Abramson says, but that satisfied you, at least, that is number 4 buckshot. Yes. Let's replace it before we lose it. The court says, give it back to the clerk. Miss Abramson says, yes, I'm going to give it to the clerk right now, Judge. Okay, I've put up on the board on your left the 2 x-ray photographs. One is Mrs. Menendez's left arm and the other one is the left chest, correct? Right. And is it your testimony that it is your opinion that the wounds to her left arm, which on the x-ray show the 2 remaining pellets, and the wounds to her left chest are connected? Yes. They're caused, in your opinion, by the same shotgun blast? Yes. The left arm was up under the breast when it was received. And were there other pellet defects on her body that also appear to be connected to that same gunshot wound? Yes. On the chest wall, it's below the breast. Sabinson says, Your Honor, before we go on, there was a shot column, this cone-shaped diagram the witness drew, which I'd like to number as an exhibit. The court says 213. Ms. Abramson says, then I'd like to have this photograph marked as 214. I'll put it up on the front. Does that photograph show additional pellet defects on the left side of Mrs. Menendez? Yes. It shows additional marks than the photograph that the prosecution marked 187, correct? Yes. I'm putting up 187. Now, this photograph that we just marked has a particularly graphic view of the right hand, correct? Yes. And the right hand was very badly distorted by pellets. It was. So it's a very mangled look. Yes. I think the best way is this. Don't you, doctor, to see what we're talking about? He says that's fine. And if you would point on 214 to the additional pellet wound that you can see on that photograph that you can't see from the one above. 3 of them in this area. There's 2 under 2 over the edge, under the breast, and then there's this one on the chest wall, correct? Yes. And all of those appear to be affiliated, do they not, with the breast wound and the arm wound? Yes. Now, on your doll, would it be fair to say that that marker is not accurately placed? I think it's pretty good. It shows to me that it's the lateral breast area. It doesn't include all the other marks we've talked about, but it's just a general idea. Well, it's showing an entry almost touching the chest wall, isn't it? It's sort of behind the breast. It doesn't have a breast protruding from the body. The doll does not have that. It has contour, I suppose. So, in that sense, I guess I could have put the wire a little bit more forward. To me, that looks like if I took the doll and tried to make it into that person, that's where I would put the gunshot wound. What? Let's do this. I've shown counsel a brassiere that I brought to court for this purpose. It is an empty brassiere and is going to stay that way. What I would like to do, or what I would like you to do, is to show me if you'd like, based on your directional doll, or if you'd rather, based on what's on that photograph, where the pellet defects show up, and I have this blue marker. Mr. Khan says, I would object to that, Your Honor, because of the inaccuracy of using an outer garment. The court says, let me ask the witness whether or not you feel this will substantially replicate what you see in the photographs or as outlined in the coroner's report. The witness says, well, I think I can do a satisfactory job of showing where most of the shots are in relation to the breast as if it were in the brassiere as if it were in the brassiere. I'm not sure if it has any value as far as explaining my testimony to the jury. The court says the photographs show the breast without any clothing, so I kind of agree with the prosecution that this isn't really going to show anything unless you have the actual garment that was worn by the decedent at the time, if she was wearing something. Ms. Abramson says we do have that as well, although not here right at the moment. But what I'm trying to see if the witness can demonstrate what he has put on his anatomical doll by way of direction where you would expect the pellets to impact. The court says, I don't think this will really prove it. Ms. Abramson says, well, the witness seems to feel that he can satisfactorily demonstrate it. The court says, I cannot see how it would. Based upon, anyway, it just doesn't seem like it will work. Ms. Abramson says, all right, Judge, I won't press you on this. Dr. Lawrence, in looking at the photograph that shows the breast 187, you don't see any defects of the side of the breast, do you? The defect extends from the nipple towards the side. So the defects are actually on the front of the breast, but they're on the left part of the front of the breast. Is that correct? Yes, I'd say that's correct. So for that to be true, is it your understanding that that Mrs. Menendez was naked at the time that she was shot? No. Is it your understanding that she was wearing a brassiere, correct? Yes. And is it fair to say that the breast may have been in a slightly different position when held inside a brassiere than it is when the body is naked and is lying on its back? That's a very good point. The whole point of your bra is to lift them up, keep them in place, keep them, higher. So he says yes. She says, so um, breasts tend to mitigate towards the sides, especially largest breasts when a woman is lying on her back, correct? Yes. And Mrs. Menendez did have largish, that's hard to say, large-ish breasts. I don't have a lisp, but I will after reading this for too long. Um, he says correct. So would it be accurate to say that in a bra, that breast would have lined up more centrally on her chest wall than is shown, more towards the center of the chest wall than is shown in that photograph? To some extent, yes. And would you expect, given where those holes are in the breast, that there would be holes in the front of her bra? I'd have to see the bra. Okay, how about a photograph of the bra with the holes? Your Honor, I have a photograph I'd like to mark 215. It's an enlargement. Let me show it to counsel because it is an enlargement of the scene photograph, okay? Showing you 215, Dr. Lawrence. First of all, do you recognize that that is an enlargement of the scene photograph? If not, I can show you the scene photograph. Yes. And is that a picture that shows the bra area, the left bra area? Yes, it's blood-soaked and there are multiple holes in the bra. And there are holes right in the front of the bra, not just the side. They are exactly where they appear to be on the breast. Let me put it this way. So, if you drew a line down the center of the left cup, for example, of the bra, there would be holes right near that line. Yes, more to the left. More to the left, but some maybe even to the right of that. A few, probably a few just to the right of that line. Now, what direction do you ascribe to this wound? I attempted to duplicate and the direction that Dr. Golden described. And what direction did Dr. Golden ascribe? Let me check his report to get exactly the way he put it. So this is number six, correct? Yes. Look at page 8 of Mrs. Menendez's autopsy report. He describes the wound path as front to back and left to right, or inward without measurable angulation upward or downward. So it's front to back and left to right. Okay. Now, in looking at the bra and envisioning the breast in the bra being more towards the center of the chest cavity, would you still agree that this is left to right? Yes. It's clear that it's left side of the breast that's more hit than the right side of the breast. Yes. But does that necessarily mean that the shots are coming from the left? Well, as you can see, the shot pellets end up inside the chest area and more towards the right side of the body. And I think the direction is so more towards the right side of the body. Isn't this the left chest wall and isn't this the midline? Yes. But if you look at imagine where the breast would be, where is the soft tissue? Right here. The pellets are more inboard. This is confusing without being able to look at the visual aids, but I hope you guys are kind of not totally lost. I'm following, but it's hard to picture some of this stuff. Anyways, Ms. Amerson says, that's if the breast is held up by the bra. They would have been more inside. Anyway, I don't understand you. Well, we're seeing a naked breast here, which moves to the side when the body is on its back, correct? Yes. In a bra, it would be brought more to the center. I understand that. So this is the center line of her body, isn't it? No, that would be, well, the center line of her breast would be roughly halfway between the spinal column on the left of the photograph and on the outside of the rib cage, which is here, as Ms. Abramson points. So this pellet basically is the center. Yes, and that would roughly be the center of the breast in the bra position as you put it. Right. The entrance holes are further out to the side, so the pellets are located more to the right. What about these? Those are much more to her left, aren't they? That's true. In fact, of the ones to the right of the center, there's actually one to the right, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 to the left, correct? I think we have that backwards. Some of the pellets will stay near the skin surface and appear to be on the left. Others, as they progress through the body, go to the right. I'm confused by that. Direction is what we're trying to indicate, not the situation of where they ended up. Huh? She says the direction you're indicating by where they end up, correct? You're saying because there are some pellets to the right of the midline of the left breast that means the direction was left to right. Exactly. But I'm pointing out that there are pellets to the left, farther left than where the entry wounds are. And they did not go, and he says, and they did not go as far. How do you know that? Therefore, they don't help as much in determining direction. He did not answer the question. You have to judge where the shots were headed and where most of them went, and that's what the doctor does when he describes the trajectory on the autopsy. As I said before, we can't create precision when it doesn't exist. There are imprecise measurements. They are estimates based on your best ability. Okay? So that's doubt to me that you don't know what you're talking about. So your best abilities, or Dr. Golden's best ability, are you just accepting Dr. Golden's decision, or are you seeing something in the x-ray that tells you the depth of the pellets? His description of the x-ray to me fit, and they fit with the angle that I've talked about. So this isn't his opinion. He's just reiterating the forensic pathologist who actually uh, viewed the bodies and investigated. So, can you tell the depth of the pellets from the x-ray? Knowing where the entrance of the pellets is in the breast, you can estimate the depth of the pellets, and you can tell that the ones towards the right side of the body are deeper. They progress further into the body. You can see that from the x-ray? All you can see from the x-ray is where they sit. So you can't tell then from the x-ray, can you? Well, you can, because if you assume, which is the correct assumption, that they entered on the breast as shown in the photograph, and then you see where they sit inside the body, then you can infer that they progress to that point. I don't understand what you're getting at. Oh, okay, so now he's getting a little combative and acting all like, what? I don't know. So that's interesting. It's an interesting tactic after he just answered the question. I'm talking about front to back depth. Only front to back depth? Yes, because his first impression is that this is front to back and then only left to right. When we're looking at a gunshot wound, what we want to do is determine the entrance point and where the missile ended up or existed, and the depth of the body is the distance between those 2 points. I'm not trying to specify direction. Okay, you're saying depth from front to back. You can't tell. You can only tell left to right. Correct. Is this in the midline? If this pellet represents the midline, okay, it would be, say, this one perhaps, then the only one that's on the other side of the midline is one which is slightly to the right. You can't jump from the skin wound to the pellet because you don't know which wounds were associated with which pellets. That's not a valid assumption. Okay. Basically, that x-ray only really shows one pellet that's to the right of the left breast midline, correct? No, I would say there are probably three, two at least, maybe three. And how many are in there altogether? Can you count? I count 12. 12. And do you believe that x-ray reflects the ones that are also, that are also shown in 214 as being lower down on the abdominal wall, the wounds under the breast? Do you believe they're shown here? Yes. And what about the one in the abdomen? Do you believe that's shown here? Probably, yes. Do you think there are 12 in there? 12 from 12 shot pellets from shot number 6? Correct. So the two in the arm is 14, correct? Yes. Now, was this a fatal wound? Potentially fatal, yes, ma'am. And at the time the death occurred, was there hemorrhaging into the pleural cavity from this wound? Yes. And how much hemorrhage was there? I'll have to check and refresh my memory. 1,000 cc's of blood in the left chest cavity. Cc's or milliliters? Milliliters. Essentially the same thing. Okay, good. 1,000 milliliters or cc's of blood into the chest cavity indicates what? It indicates that she was alive for some period of time after the wound was received and bled into the chest cavity. And at some point, does bleeding into the chest cavity cause death? It can. So what's the mechanism of death from that? Irreversible shock. Merely shock? Say it again. So shock due to loss of blood. Yes. And is there anything else that the blood in the pleural cavity can do that causes death? It can restrict the expansion of the lung and add some element of asphyxiation as well. So you can suffocate because your lungs can't expand because there's blood in the place where they usually expand to. Correct. She simplifies things so nicely. Now, according to your report, you are of the opinion that this wound to Mrs. Menendez's left breast was only part of a shot blast. Is that correct? Yes. And was that because it only accounted for 14 pellets? Yes. And did you therefore associate that potentially with the wound to Mr. Menendez's left elbow? Yes. And did you also associate it with the wound to his left elbow because his left elbow showed a spread pattern that was relatively wide, and so does the left breast wound area? Yes. And did the two patterns appear to be similar? They are. And did you therefore assume that one shot came towards both victims and caught him on the left elbow and her on the left breast? Probably, yes, ma'am. Can you show me, strike that, and is it your opinion that the blast came while both Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were seating on the couch? Yes. And can you show me, I'll be Mrs. Menendez and you be Mr. Menendez, how they could have been seated and how their bodies could have been positioned for them to have shared that wound? Yeah, I was thinking that too. Like, how could they both have gotten it on their left? Is weird. Okay, so perhaps we can do it with two people seated already. We can't. Please leave the jury out of this. Oh, he wanted to he wanted to do the jury. Did he motion to the jury? She says we can't. Please leave the jury out of this. How about two of the attorneys? I think they would not. They don't want to do it. It's not fair to use the opposition under the rules of litigation. Why don't we just pretend? I'll be Mr. Menendez sitting next to you, and I'll be Mrs. Menendez sitting next to you. The assailant is over here to our left in your hypothetical, and the shot strikes my elbow and goes into your breast. How does it get past this part of your body, your arm and your hand? Part of the shot went on by. I don't know how it could, though I'm sure there is a way to make it line up. You don't know how it got there. Okay. So you have to thrust your left shoulder out a little bit, right? And then it comes that way. And I'm sitting here and it comes into me like this. My arm is something like that. And it was coming this way? Yes. Was that based on what you saw of Mr. Menendez's elbow wound? Did it appear? Well, you've got to keep your hands in one position for a minute. You've got to decide which one. Did it look like it was coming in sort of laterally across the elbow? I can't say. So you can't tell from that pattern what direction the elbow was held in, can you? No. So it somehow struck the elbow and part of the pellets continued on into me. Yes. So coming from a left direction like that. Correct. And my arm was here somewhere, so it did that. And as she demonstrates, yes. Okay, now in a scenario, Dr. Lawrence, none of that shot enters Mrs. Menendez's right arm the way that we just demonstrated it. There were some individual pellet marks below the main defect in his right arm that could have been shot from the same shot. So let's add that to our scenario so I can visualize it. Can you come back? The witness does. Okay. Across here, his arm is next to your breast or near your arm, strikes the elbow part of it, hits the upper forearm of Mrs. Menendez, and additional pellets go on into your breast. Sounds like they have to be contortionists for all this to happen. Now, you just demonstrated that, Dr. Lawrence, with us standing up, correct? Yes. It could have happened with us standing up as far as the rounds are concerned, couldn't it? Yes. Thank you. Now, if I understand your report and your testimony and what we talked about on the telephone, you do not believe that the injury to Mr. Menendez's upper arm was part of the same blast as you believe involved his left elbow, possibly his right inner arm and her left breast, correct? I doubt that it's connected. So you don't believe it's connected, correct? I don't think so. And let me take these down and go to another set. I have another photograph, Your Honor. I'd like to mark, I think we're at 215. The court says 216. Ms. Amerson says, thank you, Your Honor. I want to show you 216, which, let me show counsel, is a slight enlargement and crop. Do you recognize what's depicted in 216? Yes. This is the upper arm of Jose Menendez. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'm writing the numbers on some of the ones that have previously been marked in the front of the exhibit as well, so for the witness to benefit. The court says, as long as you can put the same number on it. Ms. Abramson says, I hope so. That would be bad. Okay, here's 183, and I've marked it on the front. The one I can't really write on because it's all photograph. This is 202. Now, let's start with 202, which has previously been shown, and let's put up 216. Now, you can see very clearly, can't you, on those two photographs, the two separate areas of wounds on Mr. Menendez's upper right arm, correct? There's one large, ragged defect and then several small, separate pellet wounds. Would you show the jury which ones you think may have been affiliated with the same injury that occurred to his left elbow and to Mrs. Menendez's left breast? These individual pellet wounds here near the forearm at the very lower part of the upper arm. Now, in this arm, at the time that these photographs were taken, there is a very dramatically broken bone, correct? Yes. And the break is there's a protrusion here, in fact, of the bone. I can't see the bone protruding. I mean, there's a lump that looks like the bone may be pushing out the tissue. There is a fracture deformity, he calls it. Okay. But that's not the elbow, that's the upper arm, correct? Yes. The elbow is down here somewhere, is it not? About 2 inches below it, yes. So the elbow is this lump, and these individual pellet defects are really in this whole area, inner elbow or a little bit above. It's the lower portion of the lower arm. Well, they all come together in this part right here, don't they? At the elbow. Let's do this. What all come together? Huh? The upper arm and the lower arm come together at the elbow. Correct. Let's see if I can. You can help me. Okay, this is the part where you gave blood. That's called the antecubital fossa, right? Yes. Show me where my arm, Show me where on my arm these individual pellet defects are that we're seeing. Go right ahead. You can use the bigger one. The witness is marking. So above the actual middle part. I don't know if the jury can see. I'll mark it as an exhibit. He says, probably a little higher than that. Keep going. About 3 inches above the elbow at this level. So you've made a nice streak, and it's in the area around this line? Yes. All right. And the other wound, this much larger defect, is higher up on the arm. Then, yes. And based on the difference in appearance of those two wounds, they are not caused by the same blast. I do not think they are. All right. Now, certainly you've testified to some lack of certainty about whether the large defect is the exit wound or the entry wound, but your best guess is that it's an exhibit wound. Is that fair enough? No, I just don't know. I don't know which direction it went. All right. You know that Dr. Golden states unequivocally and with no hesitation that this is the exit wound, do you not? I think he changed on that. No, I don't believe so. You may pursue or peruse if you'd like. What wound number is that? That's on Mr. Menendez. He wrote an amendment on this one because in the previous autopsy report, the word forearm appeared in some places where the word upper arm should have appeared. So he wrote an amendment. So why don't you, the court says, again, we have those remarks of counsel that are not evidence. Ms. Abramson says, let me ask the witness. The court says, the remark is stricken. Ms. Abramson says, are you aware that he amended the report and clarified that error in describing part of the upper arm wound as being the forearm? Mr. Khan says, objection calls for a conclusion on the part of the witness. Overruled. The witness says, I'd like to reread the amended report to refresh my memory. Ms. Abramson says, please do. The witness says, I think he calls this one number 3. Yes, in his original report, he states that the entrance is on the back of the arm and the exit is on the front. In his amended report, he doesn't change that. Ms. Amerson says, okay, so he's never been inconsistent about the entry wound being at the back and the exit wound being where we're seeing it, this photograph here. Yes. And consistent with that, you've seen Exhibit 183. And what's going on in Exhibit 183? 183 is a color photograph showing the pathologist or autopsy assistant holding up the arm, the right arm of Jose Menendez, and it shows the gaping perforating wound on the upper arm. And it also shows a bit of the wound on the back side of the arm as well, right here, right where the pointer is. So there's a probe in that arm, right? Yes. And traditionally, don't you probe the entry and then see how it goes through to the exit? Yes. So it appears that this is the coroner, does it not? I don't know who that is. It could be the pathologist. And what he's demonstrating in this photograph, where the entry is, objection calls for speculation, overruled. The witness says, I can't tell if he's intending to demonstrate the entry or exit. I just don't know. Miss Abramson says, but the probe is certainly in the part that he has described as the entry wound. Yes. Well, duh, that makes a big difference then. So, as a very general principle, Dr. Lawrence, when it comes to shotgun rounds, where instead of seeing individual defects, you're seeing a close pattern, are entries smaller than exits? In general, yes. And in that particular wound to the upper right arm, the entry wound, as Dr. Golden defined it, is smaller than the exit wound. As far as we can see, we don't see the whole entrance wound in that, if that is the entrance. Well, didn't he measure and give measurements in his report? Yes. And in the measurements, the entry on the back of the arm is smaller than the exit on the inside of the arm, correct? Yes. Now, do you understand in looking at 123, that's not what we're on, I think. Do you know whether or not the wound is, as it appears there, is after it has been dissected? I don't know. So in the picture, is it dissected or not? Has it been dissected yet? He says he doesn't know. It does appear, does it not, to be much larger and to go all the way down to the elbow in 123 as compared to 216. Yes, but 216 doesn't show the arm extended out and there's portions that could be hidden. But yes, it does appear to be bigger. And you don't see on the lower part where you'd expect to see these individual pellet defects. They're not there anymore. There's a different view. But in any event, we're down. This is the elbow, isn't it? Yes, but the pellet marks that you're looking for would be just on the other side. Perhaps, or perhaps it's been dissected. This area here looks as if it's been dissected, the little V-shape area, so that's probably what happened. So that would correspond to about here. And that's a little risky to assume that. Oh, but you're okay with assuming a whole bunch of other things, but you can't assume that. Okay. But it does look like there's been some dissection. Yes. Now, you talked about the potential significance of scalloping, correct? Correct. Let's see if we can show what scalloping is. Now, I've got the pointer. I'll give you one. I'm removing 214 for a moment and leaving it here. When these round pellets enter the skin, if they enter with some separation, they can leave little half circles like a cookie cutter, I think is the way you described it. Yes. And could you show just roughly what scalloping would look like if the pellets have to be far enough apart to not be entering as one huge mass, right? Not quite. If you look at a mass of pellets, you could imagine that, for example, this mass of pellets is about three times the diameter that they would be inside the shell. So you can imagine that you would see little round bumps around the surface where the pellets were. And sometimes, as the shot spreads, you may end up with a group of pellets here, a group here, some individual ones, and so forth. And the wounds may have a varied appearance because of that. For example, so he's a gun expert now, too, and how shotguns enter or exit the casing. This is ridiculous. That he's supposed to be a forensic pathologist, but he's basically an expert for everything. For example, Let's say if a mass of pellets like this, we'll call number 2, we'll call this number 1. If this mass structure is the skin, you may end up with a wound that looks something like this. You would see separate satellite pellet marks around the top part where the separate pellets were a group of pellets hit. You might see a curved or scalloped appearance at the margin here. Okay, so let's mark the word scallop and point to what you mean by scallop. The witness complies. And then, with respect to this wound here, I haven't asked you a question about anything yet. I'm going to. Why don't you sit down and a second and let me know where I'm at, and then I'll go on. Now, you had described in your testimony concerning this particular wound, I wrote the word scallops. Okay, let me ask you this. First of all, I think I may have asked this before yesterday, but I'm not sure. There is no photograph that was marked by the prosecutor or that we've entered to yet that shows a straight on picture of the posterior, the back part of this wound, correct? Yes. And you have indicated that there's something that you saw as way of a linear type mark. I see, right? Let's put it back up so the jury can see. This is a linear mark here, as she points to it, at the uppermost part. It would really be here on the other photograph. It's the uppermost part of the wound. That's like a straight line, a bruise, correct? It's actually an abrasion or a bruised abrasion. Court says, "What are you referring to? What exhibit?" Ms. Abramson says, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, you're right. It's 183. There's a line there, and that line to you indicated what? A possible buttress injury. A buttress injury. In fact, Dr. Golden talked about the wound having a shortening injury. Same difference. And what he meant by that was that it appeared because there is this kind of bruise on the inside of the arm that the arm was pressed up against something when it was shot. I don't agree with that. I think it was probably from the shirt sleeve. He had a short sleeved shirt on, and I think the mark came from the edge of the shirt, with his arm out the way that you just showed, or with his arm pressed against his chest. I don't know where his arm was. Well, do you see any significant scalping in this wound? I think I do, and that's what's confusing me, and that's the reason I can't tell the direction on this wound. So you can't see scalping right there? Yes. Or you see some scalping right there as she points to it. He says yes. And that's in the same area, though the small part of the arm as these individual defects. No, it's not. No? You say you never saw a photograph of the back of the arm. Not a straight on photograph. When a body is brought into the coroner's office before the autopsy is performed, is the body washed? Yes. And is that because it's easier to visualize wounds if the caked blood and dirt and debris is removed? Yes. So it is harder to see wound patterns, say in the scene photographs in this case, than the autopsy photographs? Yes. However, we don't have an autopsy photograph that shows that elbow, do we? Not the elbow, the back of the upper arm. Correct. So I want to show you a couple of scene photographs that are very bloody. These are enlargements showing them to counsel. This is the slightly large enlargement. That's the more enlargement so you can orient yourself. Did you ever see those photographs or the photograph that those are an enlargement of when you were looking through the scene photographs? No. If I show you the reference photo for that, let me show you the reference photograph to make sure. This is the reference photograph, the one that's the enlargement that the enlargement was taken from. Do you know if you ever saw that one before? Yes, I think I've seen that one. It's hard to see in that smaller one. This is so blown up, it looks much different, but yes, I think I have seen this one. Does that blow up help you at all? It's difficult. I can't be sure. It does appear from the blow up that there are areas of scalping on the back of that arm, doesn't it? I don't see that. Would you point it out? This curvature here, that and this curvature and this little piece here. I'm sorry, I'm not convinced. I guess it could be, again, This wound defies interpretation. It's just a difficult wound. Or are you a difficult witness? Dr. Golden saw these wounds and has described it now in both his original and amended report as coming from the back to the front, correct? Yes. The court says, did you want those photographs marked? Ms. Amerson says, yes, I do, Your Honor. Court says, you're at 217. Ms. Amerson says, they have a number on the bottom, and for reference, I'm going to make 251, 217, 251A, and 218. Now, Dr. Lawrence, you're aware from Dr. Golden's report that some marks he associates some marks on Mr. Menendez right arm with what he calls an exit wound on the upper arm. Yes. And those marks appear, again, I have to always look at 202, this photograph. They appear in these reddened areas with a sort of stripped separation on the right chest area, correct? Yes. Your Honor, I'd like to mark the diagram that the witness has drawn to demonstrate scalloping as the court says 219. Ms. Abrams says 219. I want to use this for some definitions. First of all, is there a difference, Dr. Lawrence, between an abrasion and a contusion? Yes. And would you explain what an abrasion is as compared to what a contusion is? A contusion is a bruise, and it means that there's been bleeding beneath the skin. It's due to blunt force injury. And an abrasion is a scraping off of the skin, and it's usually due to some sort of glancing blow. So something that breaks the surface of the skin. It scrapes off the outer layer of the epidermis, the outer surface of the skin, and if it's a deep abrasion, displaying bleeding. And that's what happens, for example, when kids fall and scrape their knee. Yes, that's an abrasion. But if you bump your knee without breaking the skin, you wind up with a bruise, which is a contusion. Correct. All right. Now you have referred, I guess we don't have to write it. You have referred to those marks on Mr. Menendez's chest as abrasions. Is that right? Yes. In fact, they're contusions, aren't they? They're bleeding under the skin? No, I would describe them as brush abrasions or carpet abrasions, the kind of thing you would get if you scraped your knee along the carpet. That's what you think they are? Yes. All right. Do you see on the photograph or on any photographs that have been shown to you any evidence of any seepage of blood or serum or anything that would indicate that the skin was scraped in that area? Well, the marks themselves are what I would describe as dried red-brown abrasions. Well, and they are typical of someone who has been scraped by his own clothing if he falls down on the street, for example, or has a carpet burn on his knee, or something like that. It's a scraping off of the skin surface when enough injury to let some blood come up from below and make it turn sort of dark brown red, or red brown, whatever. Do you see signs of serum or blood liquid? Yes, the color of the wound shows there's some blood mixed in there. That's what you think you see? That is what I see. Okay, and your explanations for this, well, let me ask you this. If these were not abrasions, if these were bruises, contusions, would your explanation make any sense? That they are fabric abrasions from the clothing? No. It would not make sense, would it? No. So if, however, they were bruises and I were to indicate hypothetically what happened was that the right arm was up against the chest, that a shot column came from behind, and the force of that column coming in banged the arm against the chest and caused those contusions, would that be consistent with there being bruises? Those aren't contusions, and it didn't happen that way. Wow. Now that's just showing your bias. I'm sorry. It didn't happen that way. No, ma'am. Remember we talked about cavitation? Yes. And how a shot column coming through that arm would press the tissue and the skin out. Then a cavitation is a word that I don't use. It's a word that you brought up. It's a word you're not that familiar with. Is that correct? I didn't say that. And the concept is something you're not that familiar with. Is that correct? I didn't say that either. It's a term that I don't use because it has very limited usefulness in its specialty. All right, but it has a great deal of usefulness in the specialty of wound ballistics, doesn't it? It's frequently incorrectly used and it's the subject of debate, and I would rather avoid those issues, so I don't use the term. Sir, you are a forensic pathologist. How would you know that it's frequently incorrectly used and it's a subject of debate? Why would like what? You've got some kind of skin in the game for this witness, or for the this witness has some kind of skin in the game and he wants a conviction, it seems, or he's trying to push a certain narrative that the state wants him to. So it seems from what I'm reading. Leslie Abramson says, you realize that Dr. Golden's report indicates that he believed that those injuries were caused by the pressure of the arm against the chest, correct? I can't be sure what he thought about those wounds. Well, if I were to tell you that that's what he's going to testify, he thought about those wounds as a hypothetical, I'd rather talk to him. Objection, no foundation, says Mr. Khan. The court says sustained, the answer is stricken. Mrs. Abramson says, you've had the opportunity to talk to him for weeks. You didn't choose to call him, did you, Dr. Lawrence? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. It's a good question. It's a relevant question. Now, your theory is that pellets dragged the shirt across his chest somehow, correct? Yes, ma'am. That's one possibility. Well, what's the other possibility? Someone could have kicked him in the chest with a glancing blow with a shoe. What? What? Kicked him in the chest. Here's the doll for Mr. Menendez. Now, if I'm looking at this doll properly, it demonstrates that the chest wall, even on a man, is not a flat board like object. Correct. It curves, correct? Yes. And these bruises, and I think you can even see in the picture, these marks, if you will, are on the rounded side of the wall of the chest. They're on the rib cage, yes, which is rounded and turns. Yes. Right. Now, where in your hypotheses are these pellets that cause this clothing to burn around his chest coming from? Again, as I stated yesterday, I'm not sure about the direction of this gunshot wound. It could be either from the front or from the back. So the pellets are coming from the arm. Yes, they're either coming across the body from the front, glancing and catching part of the shirt as they go to the arm and dragging the shirt forcefully across the skin, or they're coming from the back of the arm, though through the arm, again catching part of the shirt and maybe less likely out in front and dragging it on the skin. So these are pellets of metal, correct? Yes. Fired by a firearm. Yes. Traveling fast enough and with sufficient force to go through someone's arm and break a bone, right? Yes. Do you think they might tear the fabric that you have them pulling on? They might. Yes, ma'am. They might. Have you even looked at the shirt to see if there's any fabric tears in the area where those marks appear? No. Have you seen a photograph of the shirt? No. If I were to submit to you that there are no fabric tears in that shirt anywhere near either where the arm wound is or where those marks are, does that tell you there's something wrong? Well, you could have seen the shirt, couldn't you? Did you ask? Objection, argumentative, sustained. That's not argumentative. She absolutely could ask, did you ask to see the shirt? Your Honor, I have a demonstration toy I would like to mark. The court says, have you shown it to counsel? Let's do it during recess. You can show it to him there. So we've got recess, and I want to get through direct or through cross. So I think we have a little bit more. Hold on, let me see how much we got. All right, well, we have a lot more to go to get through cross, so we're not going to finish that. But I will read we'll keep going a little bit more, even though it's a break and it's a good time to take a break, but I want to get a little more in today. So the court says, "Is there something you wanted to talk about with the jury?" Ms. Abramson says, "Yes." Ms. Abramson says, "Yes, Your Honor. I wanted to use, for the purpose of displaying the shirt, this stuffed animal so I could ask the witness to demonstrate the pulling shirt abrasion. I wanted a shirt that was big enough so the jury could see it. I do not intend to mark the animal as an exhibit. This belongs to my son, and he'd have a heart attack. I just want to mark the shirt. It has a rounded chest wall, as you can see. I want to use it for a demonstration for the witness to indicate how he believes these shirt abrasions that he's testified to could have occurred. That's all." The court says, "Do you wish to be heard?" Mr. Khan says, "I would oppose that. I don't think that's an appropriate exhibit for this jury. I think counsel knows it. I think she is making this offer of proof tongue in cheek. I don't think that either the stuffed animal or even the small shirt has any place in this trial." Ms. Abramson says, "Well, the people use these little anatomical dolls that don't even move properly. They've got markers on them that the witness admits are inaccurate. All I want him to do is try to demonstrate a basic proposition. I think it works better with a t-shirt, which is what the victim was wearing, rather than have somebody with a button shirt do the demonstration. I intend to have him mark on the shirt where the pellets could have impacted it in such a way to impact this abrasion, to make the abrasion." The court says, "I have no problem with the shirt, but I don't think the use of the doll is appropriate. This is a teddy bear. It wouldn't be appropriate." Ms. Abramson says, "Well, Judge, as I say, I don't intend to put the doll into evidence." The court says, "I understand." Ms. Abramson says, "You can demonstrate anything with just a shirt, or you can't demonstrate anything with just a shirt. It has to be on something." The court says, "Come up with something else." Ms. Amerson says, "Come up with something else. Are there any small children in the room?" The witness says, "You can use me." "I can't take the shirt off your back, Dr. Lawrence. That would put you in LA too long, or that would keep you in LA too long. I don't understand the nature of the ruling. No one is going to claim this animal belongs to the defense. It's not going in to evidence. It's just a mannequin for the shirt." Court says, "Basically, it's frivolous." "Oh," says Ms. Amerson. The court says, "The use of it under Section 352 of the Evidence Code, the probative value is substantially outweighed by its potential for prejudice." Ms. Amerson says, "It's frivolous? Anything else before we proceed? Let's get the jury out." Ms. Amerson says, "I don't believe I'll be done with the witness today, Your Honor." Court says, "That's okay." The jury comes back out. Court says, "The jury is back. You may continue your cross-examination." Ms. Abramson says, "I just want to ask you a couple of questions before I ask you to do a demonstration for me, Dr. Lawrence. First of all, if Dr. Golden is correct and the upper arm injury to Mr. Menendez goes from back to front, can you envision any way that could have occurred while Mr. Menendez was seated on the couch?" "Yes, he could have been shot from behind." "From behind what?" "Behind the couch." "And are there any holes through the couch?" "I don't know." "You don't know? Well, let me indicate that there's been testimony in this case from the investigating officer that there are no holes going through the couch." Mr. Khan says, "I'm going to object, calls for hearsay, and assumes facts not in evidence." Ms. Amerson says, "As a hypothetical." The court says, "Why don't you just phrase it in a hypothetical way? Let's say, hypothetically, there are no holes going through the back of the couch, and let's see, where is the scene photograph? When you examined the scene photographs, did you also have a list of where the various items of ballistics and evidence were gathered from in the scene?" "No." "So do you even know what the direction of fire was in that room?" "No." This guy is a horrible witness. But jurors, a lot of people just think, oh, those people are guilty because they're in the hot seat. So automatically they're guilty. And some jurors don't take the time to pick apart the cross examination and look at how these witnesses are very unreliable, not credible. And yeah, it's hard for me to look at these cases and see. credible witnesses, whereas a lot of jurors will overlook it because they just think automatically the state is not going to lie, or they're being truthful for whatever reason, and that's not always the case. Just let me show you this photograph that you've previously been shown. It's exhibit number 201, and that shows Mr. Menendez seated on the couch, correct? Yes. And it shows the height of the back of the couch relative to his body, correct? Yes. And again, reminding you of the hypothetical, which is that there are no blasts through the back of that couch. You see where his right arm is in that photograph? Yes. He could not have been in that position at the time he was shot if he were shot from behind the right arm, could he? From behind the couch? No. So how could he have been shot in the back of the right arm? Can you envision any position? He was standing with his back, or the back of his right arm facing the door, obviously. So the arm would be held up above the level of the couch or perhaps resting on the back of the couch, or he could have been leaning forward. Or he could have been standing up with his back towards the shooter, couldn't he? Yes. So let me see, based on your testimony thus far, when Mrs. Menendez received the wound to the right orbit and cheek and nose and forehead and left cheek area, she could have been standing up, correct? Yes. When she received the wound to the right mandible, clavicle, right hand, right arm, she could have been standing up. Yes. When Mr. Menendez received the wound to the left elbow, he could have been standing up. Yes. When he received the wound to the inner right arm, the lower wound, he could have been standing up. Yes. When Mrs. Menendez received the wound to the left breast, she could have been standing up. Yes. And whether front to back or back to front, when Mr. Menendez received the wound to the upper arm, he certainly could have been standing up. Yes. I think you've indicated that, depending on the position he was in which Mrs. Menendez received. Pardon me? I was waiting for the coughing. Depending on the position in which she was holding her leg when Mrs. Menendez received the wound to below the left knee. Above the left knee, she was theoretically could have been standing up. So he said emphatically she was sitting down. They were both sitting down. Now he's changing and saying that they all could have been, all those wounds could have been while they were standing up. So a bizarre position. Oh, wait. So above the left knee, she theoretically could have been standing up. Though it was an uncomfortable position. A bizarre position, yes, ma'am. But possible. Yes. If a wound has what appears to be straight tears of the skin and was caused by a shotgun, is that more likely to be an entry wound or an exit wound? I don't understand what you mean by straight. Instead of scalloping or ragged edges, if it looks like the skin has split, has torn straight, is that more likely an exit or entry? I'd have to see the wound. Isn't there a straightness to the tear on the inner arm? See the line? Isn't that an absolutely straight, torn piece of skin? That's the one that, well, let me look closer at that. The court says again, which exhibit are you referring to? Ms. Abrams says, I'm sorry, Your Honor, 216. The witness says, I would describe that as a dog ear or fairly straight tear, a dog ear, or a fairly straight tear at the edge. Ms. Abramson says, when skin splits, are you likely to see a straight tear rather than a scalloped one? Yes. And right next to the tear, there's an area that looks to me like scalloped. And then there's the linear mark down at the bottom, which is along another straight tear. Is it not? Where is that? The one you showed me in the other photograph. It's not in that photograph. The one, yeah, that's actually the top, and that is which I would call contused or bruised abrasion. So a bruised abrasion. So now we have a combination bruise and abrasion there. Yes. I was going to ask you now to demonstrate something with my colleague, Mr. Levin, who is going to remove his jacket with the court's permission. Would you approach the witness, Mr. Levin? Could I ask you to take off your tie? Could he take off his tie? The court says, sure. Thank you. Mr. Levin says, that's as far as I'm going. Ms. Abramson says, that's as far as I'm going to ask you to go. Stand here, sir. Exhibit. I won't mark this as an exhibit. Now, I would like you to show you recognize, do you not, that Mr. Menendez was wearing what appears to be a short sleeved, open collared type polo shirt? Yes. So, not a suit, a dress shirt like Mr. Levin is wearing now. And you've indicated that you believe, could you show us, by the way, on Mr. Levin's body, where these red marks that we can see in 202, where these red marks appear? Right here, or right about here. And you're pointing to the side of the right chest wall, just below his right breast. And could you show us, with Mr. Levin's shirt, how you believe that the shirt and the pulling of the shirt turn slightly cause these what you call abrasions on his arm? I believe that the shot caught part of the shirt in this area and pulled violently across the skin that way, as he demonstrates on the shirt. So the shot caught the shirt here. Yes. And pulled it and then continued on into the arm is one of your theories? This is so ridiculous. I can't even believe he's testifying to this. Would that wind up with the exit wound being where it is? Yes. You think so? Now, I note that it also pulls the other side of the shirt, does it not? Yes. And there are no, this is great. This is great cross-examination. That there are no abrasions or burn marks on the other side of Mr. Menendez's chest, are there? No. And you don't know. You're talking about the many pellets. Do you think, uh, and you don't know. You're talking about the many pellets. Do you think? I don't know what that question means. I have no idea. Well, if this is an entry wound, do you know that, or are you still undecided? I'm undecided. If it were an entry wound, it's rather large, isn't it? Yes. And doesn't show individual pellet defects, does it? No. So it looks like it's a lot of bunched pellets going through there if that's an entry wound. Well, it looks as if the skin has split, and so I'm not saying that the pellets would cause the whole wound. As I say, I don't know if it's an entry or an exit wound. Okay, fair enough. But if there are no tears in the shirt, in the area where they would have to be to support your thesis, would that tend to suggest that it's an exit wound? I'd like to see the shirt. Would that tend to suggest it's an exit wound? If there are no tears in the shirt anywhere? Well, if there's no tears in the shirt anywhere where it could cause that. I don't understand what you're saying. This is ridiculous. Of course you understand the question. It's not that difficult. Well, you just showed where the tears would have to be, so they'd somehow have to be adjacent to or near the holes in the arm to be pulling for the pellets to be pulling the shirt towards that hole. Yes. By the way, there's no fabric of any kind in that wound, is there? No, not that I can see. You do believe, do you not, that if pellets from a shotgun impact a shirt, they're going to tear right through, aren't they? They would, yes. So don't you think they're going to tear through so fast it isn't going to pull the shirt at all? They're just going to punch a hole in it. I have no idea. We'd have to do some tests. So then how are you testifying to this if you have no idea that that could happen? Wow. If they punch through, then it wouldn't be pulling the shirt across the chest wall and wouldn't be causing those marks, right? I don't understand your question. Well, if the pellets come up to the shirt and just punch a hole in the shirt, you have this notion that somehow these pellets have little hands and they grab the shirt and just pull it? No. So you don't think that? No. Okay, so the pellets coming up against a piece of fabric simply punch holes in it. They're not going to pull the fabric. They're just going to punch holes in and go through. My theory is they would pull the fabric. All right. But that the fabric but that the pulled fabric would only cause these marks on one side of the chest, not the other side? Correct. That makes no sense. This guy makes no sense. Now, there is also an individual pellet in the sternum of Mr. Menendez. Do you know that? I see it in that photograph. Is that what you were referring to as he points to that, this area there? Yes. How do you explain that? It could come from the wound regardless of the direction. Well, you're aware that Dr. Golden indicated that this blast passed from the back of Mr. Menendez's arm through the front of his arm, and then one of the pellets entered the chest. Yes, seems a bit unlikely given the angle. Well, would you admit, Dr. Lawrence, that the notion the pellets would drag a piece of material to cause those marks is also relatively unlikely? No. Okay. If I understand your previous testimony, you do not believe that pellets passed through Mr. Menendez's upper right arm and then into Mrs. Menendez's breast, correct? Correct. So you ruled that out completely, correct? To my satisfaction, yes. Then I want to ask you now, when Mr. Khan asked you if you had looked over the diagrams from the engineering firm, do you remember that? Yes. And if you saw anything there that you didn't agree with, remember that? Yes. I'm going to show you the diagram and ask you the question again. First of all, during the noon recess after we came back, did you compare your set of diagrams that you have received with the set of diagrams that I showed you? Yes. And were they slightly different? Yes. And did you look over my diagrams and indicate that although the furniture dimensions may be different with respect to the wound information, they were the same? Yes. And I want to show you a diagram. Your Honor, I'd like to mark this next in order. The court says 220. Ms. Abramson says, do you recognize 220, a diagram that has the word shot 1A on it as being substantially similar to the one that you were provided with? Yes. And do you understand what is being conveyed in that diagram by the green line that runs to the right of the larger figure, actually to the left of the larger figure into the smaller figure? It shows a shot striking his left elbow, then passing through his upper arm into the breast. And you disagree with that, don't you? Yes, I do. As I said before, I don't believe it went through the arm and upper arm. I think a few pellets might have struck the arm, but I don't think it caused that big gaping defect. So, with respect to this illustration prepared by failure analysis, you do not agree the medical findings do not support the diagram, correct? Not 100%. No, ma'am. And they don't support it right here, where it shows shots going through the upper arm and into her left breast, correct? Yes. And there's an overhead view of the same thing, which is what they call shot 1B, correct? Yes. And on this diagram, I'll mark with an X, again, the part that you do not agree with, correct? Yes. Do you want that 221? Miss Abramson says, I do, Your Honor, thank you. Now, I want to turn to Mr. Menendez's left leg wound. I am just looking for the X-ray photograph of the left leg. I think I found it. Oh, it's up there. That's why I can't find it. Let's go back to the scene photograph, which is, and the mannequin just fell off the witness stand. All right. So your basic unbreakable art dummies. Okay, here's 201 again, which is a scene photograph that you've been using as a reference, 182, which is a coroner's photograph of or an autopsy photograph of the leg wound, and 176, which is a photograph of the x-ray of Mr. Menendez's left leg. That's the broken part of the femur, isn't it? Yes. Those are marked. Could you do me a favor and put your version away? Because if they get mixed up, okay, now this is the wound that you claim is postmortem, correct? Yes. And you're aware that in Dr. Golden's autopsy report from 1989 and in his testimony, he testifies that this wound is antemortem before death. Yes. So would it be fair to say this is the area of your greatest disagreement with Dr. Golden? Well, Not really. It's, as I tried to explain earlier, it's difficult to be sure about the antemortem or postmortem with these wounds, as he describing the hemorrhage along the wound path and uses that to conclude that it's antemortem. On another wound, he described hemorrhage along the wound path and then changed his mind and described it as postmortem. That's really not what I asked you. Mr. Khan says, objection, let him finish. The witness says, I'm trying to be responsive to your question and to say I don't have any. Yes, he changed his opinion, but I don't think he based that opinion on the evidence that I used. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I'd move to strike the answer basically as non-responsive, dealing with a wound I'm not even talking about. The court says the question had to do with the major difference that you had to do with Dr. Golden. Your answer was non-responsive. The witness says, I was trying to compare it to my other disagreements, and that's the reason the other wound came in. Ms. Abramson says, let me do it this way. You've indicated that even you can't say for sure that the cheek wound, which is the other one that we were talking about to Mrs. Menendez, was ante, peri, or post mortem, correct? Correct. So, Dr. Golden, although he described hemorrhage along that wound path, he also talked about how the wound paths intersected in the head, correct? Yes. And his current thinking about reviewing it was either peri or postmortem. That's the left cheek wound. Yes. He's never changed his opinion about his left leg wound, has he? No. And there was no other injury to Mr. Menendez's left leg and no intersecting wound path, correct? Yes, correct. And he indicated with respect to this that he found hemorrhaging all along the wound path, as he did in the other one. Well, I'm not asking you about the other one because he didn't know which was the wound path in the other one. This one, there's no dispute about the wound path, correct? The court says, all right, let's not argue. The question is compound. Ms. Abramson says there's no possible confusion about the wound path in the leg injury, where there's only one wound, correct? Yes. All right. And have you said in your report in discussing you have an entire paragraph or two devoted to the topic of antemortem versus postmortem? You said, quote, all the wounds show varying degrees of hemorrhage associated with them, and all could be antemortem or postmortem or perimortem, rather. That's with respect to Mrs. Menendez, correct? Yes. In order for a wound to have a postmortem appearance, it must appear bloodless compared to antemortem wounds and to show no hemorrhage in the tissue. You wrote that, correct? Yes. Now, Dr. Golden, and not you, saw the wound path for that left leg, correct? Yes. And in order for there to be blood in blood vessels, the heart has to be pumping. Can we agree on that basic postulate? Would you repeat the question? In order for there to be blood in the smallest blood vessels in the body, okay, and for blood to come out of those vessels, there has to be a pumping heart. There has to be blood pressure. No. So it's your contention. And as I said in my report, the next sentence when you stop reading, I said, I should also mention that it is possible for postmortem shotgun wounds to have an antemortem appearance. This is because of hydrostatic pressure that may remain within the circulatory system after death, causing a rather forceful excursion of blood into the tissues at the time of wounding, thereby mimicking an antemortem wound. This is the reason these wounds are difficult to interpret. Well, they're difficult for you to interpret, Mr. Khan says. Objection, argumentative. And the court says that's a gratuitous remark that will be stricken. I liked it though. Ms. Abramson says, you don't know if Dr. Golden had any difficulty, do you? His interpretations vary considerably from time to time, and I would say that the man had great difficulty. You don't know, you weren't there. So do you have any evidence that Dr. Golden had any difficulty interpreting this wound? No, not this particular wound. And by your own description, one of the signs that a wound is antemortem is if the trace through the wound path all the damaged tissue and you see that there has been bleeding and blood released in all the damaged tissue. That's one of the methods of deciding it, correct? Yes. So why doesn't it matter whether or not there's blood in those tissues? How does that tend to indicate, just say tend for the moment, antemortem? If the heart is beating, there will be a higher pressure of blood in those vessels than there is if they're not bleeding, if it's not bleeding. So you're likely not beating, but as I said before, either one can produce an appearance of hemorrhage. So it makes no difference. What you're saying is hemorrhage along the wound path makes no difference. It can't be a sign of anything. Is that what you're saying? It's the absolute absence of hemorrhage is a good sign of postmortem. The presence of hemorrhage is not so reliable, but it's a sign of antemortem wound. Yes. Now, if I understand you correctly, your main contention as to why this is postmortem is based on what you see in the scene photograph? Yes, ma'am. And not what Dr. Golden saw in the wounds. That's right. And so you're saying that since there isn't blood near that wound in the scene diagram, you believe it's postmortem. In essence, yes. That's scientific. And that assumes, does it not, that the wound was inflicted when Mr. Menendez was in the position and at the location that he's seen in that scene diagram. Yes, that the leg might have been closer together, closer to the other leg. But you don't know if, in fact, he was in that position when he received that wound to his left leg, do you? Well, what I'm saying is that he was seated in that area when he received that. How do you know that? As far as his body position. Dr. Lawrence, do you know if he was in that position when he received that wound? That's merely the way he was found. Isn't that true? Objection, argumentative, overruled. Isn't that true? What I've said before or tried to say before, if he were or if he were elsewhere, yes, when he received that wound and it was antemortem, right? There would be lots of blood at that location. And there's lots of blood in other locations at the scene, isn't there, Dr. Lawrence? Then we would somehow then after that wait, the question is, or his answer is, and then he would somehow then after that sit down? Right. And then but die before he sat down. Is that what you're saying? No, because you're using the lack of the blood at the scene to prove postmortem, right? He sits, as he sits there with that wound, you're saying that in some other time he was not there. Right. I'm asking hypothetically. And he was alive? Then suddenly he becomes seated and dead? And how did that happen? Well, we've got to break down the circle here, okay? Bear with me. Hypothetically, let's assume he is standing up and you know, by the way, that Dr. Golden testified that what he saw in that wound and what he saw in those scene photographs was entirely consistent with Mr. Menendez standing up when he received that leg wound. You remember that, do you not? If you will look at the photograph below, you will see that it's not really consistent with that because with the leg in the straight position, the skin wrinkles and the wound takes on an unnatural appearance. As Abramson says, move to strike is non-responsive. The court says sustained. The answer is stricken. Ms. Abramson says, I'm talking about Dr. Golden's testimony, which you did read, correct? Yes. And you are aware that Dr. Golden testified that the wound, as it appeared to him, and in view of his review of the scene photographs, it was entirely consistent with his medical opinion that Mr. Menendez was standing and alive when he received the leg wound. You are aware of that testimony? No, ma'am. I don't remember all of those things. I don't remember his talking about the scene photographs and the alive and all of that with respect to that question. So you don't recall his saying that he does not believe that Mr. Menendez was seated on the couch in that position when he received that wound? No, I'd like to review or see the area that he says that. All right. Now let's get back to antemortem, postmortem. I think we had established, tell me if I'm wrong, have we established that you can tell from just the wound alone, you personally, whether it's antemortem or postmortem? You look to the scene to give you information, correct? Often, that's correct. Sometimes you can tell, sometimes you can't. I mean here, this wound. I don't mean in general. You couldn't tell from this wound alone, you've told us, whether it was antemortem or postmortem. You looked at the scene, and that's what helped you make up your mind. Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to write Mr. M. leg wound. This isn't working well. Let me get another pen. Ante versus post. You know we mean mortem here. Can't tell from wound. All right? That's where we are right now. So then you look at the scene, correct? Yes. And you testified, I believe, that because there is so little blood below the wound that it must have been post mortem, correct? In essence, yes. And that assumes, though, that the leg was in the position, was in this position when it was shot with him seated on the couch, somewhere in that vicinity. Well, seated on the couch? That he was seated on the couch when he was shot. And if he were seated on the couch when he was shot and there isn't a lot of blood, then that tends to tell you that it was post mortem, right? Yes. But if he wasn't seated on the couch and the blood went somewhere else, that doesn't help you in your investigation as to whether it's anti or post mortem, does it? Repeat the question, please. I thought it was perfectly clear. If he were not seated on the couch when he received that injury, and if the absence of blood is explained because he was somewhere else and the blood went somewhere else, then you can't use the lack of blood under that wound as a basis to describe it as postmortem. No, because the scene you gave requires that he was somewhere else standing, was shot antemortem, then died, and then became seated where he is now. No, you're begging the question. Well, let me get to the next point. The scene you're looking at, because there's no blood below or little blood, okay? Correct. Now, I think we get to the assumption you are assuming that the femoral artery is damaged, are you not? Or a major vessel in that area. Okay, a major vessel damage. And you are assuming major vessel damage, and if your assumption were correct and there were major vessel damage, then there'd be a lot of blood coming out of this wound, correct? Yes. And even after he was dead and sat down, there'd still be a lot more oozing than what you see here. That's possible, yes. Now, let me ask you a hypothetical, Dr. Lawrence. I want you to assume hypothetically that there is no major vessel damage. Okay? Therefore, there is no reason to expect a great deal of bleeding from this wound. Okay? Now, can you now determine if it's antemortem or postmortem? If there were no major vascular injury, the answer would be no. Now, you have indicated when I asked you earlier, let me read something to you and see if you agree with this premise. Quote, it has been pointed out that bleeding from a wound in the soft tissue of the thigh resulted primarily from the rupture of capillaries and small blood vessels. It has been a matter of frequent observation that the larger blood vessels, particularly the arteries passing in or near the wound cavity, were apparently undamaged. These vessels are very elastic, and the assumption was made that unless they lay directly in the path of the missile, they were merely blown aside during the expansion of the temporary cavity and sprang back to their original positions with its collapse. Are you aware of that research? No, but it sounds reasonable. And it appears in a 1962 book published by the Office of the Surgeon General, Department of the Army, entitled Wound Ballistics. Now, let's move on to the diagrams. Hold on, I think we're almost done here. I went longer than I expected. We still have a little bit left, so I'm going to stop here because we're switching topics now that she's going into the diagrams of his femur. So we will stop here, and I will we'll pick up part 31 at this exact location. I'm just making a record for myself so I know where we're starting at. And that's all I have for you for this episode. And I will see you guys in the next one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. So far, I think this has been an excellent cross by Abramson, especially later on in the cross. She's really getting him to admit some things that he didn't want to admit to. She's really making him look kind of foolish, rather, if you ask me. And yeah, I think she's doing a great job breaking apart this. Remember, this is a forensic pathologist that they brought on for the second trial, who Dr. Golden is the one that actually did the autopsies. So she is, or she rightly, she's questioning, why did they bring on this other person and he's changed his opinions? Let's dissect those opinions. So she's doing a really good job of it, and I think I like where this is going. We're almost done. I think we got about 20 more pages of her cross, and then we get to redirect. So we will see where we go from here. I will see you guys in the next episode. Take care. Thanks for hitting the like button, subscribe, leaving comments below. I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.